The Palestinian national poet Mahmoud Darwish has written, "We suffer from an incurable malady, which is hope." And the possibility of a ceasefire in Gaza, as the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken flies to Israel, is gathering significant international attention and hope for the first time. President Joe Biden's assertion that the agreement has never been closer offers a glimpse of hope and optimism in an otherwise bleak and protracted conflict. And Biden has sent Blinken to Israel on the assumption that this isn't a time when Iran is going to throw its missiles at the Iron Dome. Nevertheless, the area is tense, there is complexity, there is uncertainty, and yet there is hope. And it's a little bit like Pandora's box. Is there one remnant of positivity, of optimism left in that box? Maybe. This morning on BBC's Radio 4, there was an interestingly nuanced overview of the ongoing situation. And the indirect talks in Qatar have been described as progressing in an unprecedentedly positive atmosphere, yet without Hamas, which marks a significant tone from earlier stages of the conflict. And yet, of course, this optimism is tempered by the continuing Israeli airstrikes in Gaza and the skepticism expressed by Hamas officials who accuse Israel of changing the conditions for a ceasefire. Israel, on the other hand, says that its position remains consistent, highlighting the deep mistrust that continues to hinder progress. But, these are two groups that are in a state of war. Even in negotiations, is going to be a struggle for the high ground of truth. The issue of control over the so-called Philadelphia corridor, the border area between Gaza and Egypt, remains a sticking point, and Hamas's demand for Israeli withdrawal from this area clashes directly with Israel's insistence on maintaining military control over Gaza, underscoring the critical and controversial gaps that still exist and that will continue to exist. What is needed at this moment is a principle of a ceasefire leading to a permanent peace. What would be disappointing would be if this is simply another ceasefire where there's a trade of prisoners. That would be positive, but not positive enough. It wouldn't signal the end of the conflict. What we actually need is a ceasefire as part of a roadmap towards a two-state solution. But is that ever possible now with the settlers' continued eroding of Palestinian land? The question of where the Palestinians in Gaza will be allowed to return to their home in northern and central parts of Gaza, and under what conditions, that also remains largely unresolved. Complicating the situation further is the recent attack by Israeli settlers on the West Bank village of Jit, which was reported by the BBC. This brutal incident, in which settlers set fire to homes and killed a young Palestinian man, is part of the broader pattern of escalating settler violence, and such actions, tolerated if not encouraged by elements within the Israeli government, you can think particularly of Ben Gvir, exacerbate tensions and make the prospect of lasting peace ever more remote, ever less tangible. The expansion of illegal settlements, which the UN has directly condemned, diminishes the chances of a viable two-state solution and therefore of a lasting peace. Those two things go together. Unless there's an alternative solution that can be presented, and so far Israel hasn't done that, there isn't another peace option on the table. So rejecting the two-state solution is simply being negative. Israel has to come up with an alternative if there is to be peace. And adding another layer to this complex scenario is news from Turkey that the Palestinian president, Mahmoud Abbas, intends to visit Gaza. And this potential visit could signify a shift in Palestinian leadership dynamics, although its impact on the peace process remains uncertain. Abbas's involvement could either facilitate or further complicate efforts towards a ceasefire, depending on how it's perceived by both Hamas and Israel. And The Economist, always a useful tool, provides a critical perspective on the ongoing negotiations. While there's some cautious optimism about the potential ceasefire, the absence of Hamas from direct talks, coupled with ongoing violence, casts significant doubt on the sustainability of any agreement that might ever be reached. The humanitarian situation in Gaza continues to deteriorate, and without addressing the underlying issues such as the blockade and control over Gaza by Israel, any ceasefire is likely only to be a temporary respite in a conflict that remains unresolved at its core. So while diplomatic efforts are intensifying, there is a sign of progress, and there is some optimism, but the road to peace, even the road to a ceasefire, is fraught with obstacles, not least because of the deep mistrust, the deep-seated mistrust that lies between the two parties, the ongoing violence, the broader political context that suggests that even if a ceasefire is achieved, it will be a fragile and temporary pause rather than a lasting solution. The international community, particularly the United States, needs to challenge this assumption and needs to navigate these obstacles with urgency and with a clear understanding of the complexities involved and the overall mission. The overall mission is to achieve peace. Anything short of that is a failure.